Welcome back to another episode of Warren Cali. In this episode, I will detail the story of Mad Ronnie from the Rollin 60 Crips. Mad Ronnie was born in Grand Lions, November 27, 1963, and he would grow up in South Central. Around 1940, a flood of African Americans would flood into Los Angeles. They poured into Los Angeles during the Great Depression in search of jobs during World War II, and that would follow into years later. African Americans were only defined to living in certain parts of Los Angeles, but with so many African Americans coming in abundance, the housing situation faced shortages, and many housing projects were built, and many African Americans moved closer to white areas, making whites flee from areas, causing white flight, with white Americans not wanting to live in the same areas as blacks. Many black Los Angeles residents took this as a sign and moved into the once white areas, and that became areas like Compton and South Central, where blacks were only confined to areas like Watts, and many black residents saw this as moving up in life, moving into homes. But by the 70s, the success many African Americans were having would go downhill, with rapid decline of many areas' manufacturing bases resulted in the loss of jobs that had allowed many skilled union workers to enjoy middle-class lifestyles. Widespread unemployment, poverty, and street crime contributed to the rise of street gangs in South Central, and by the 70s, the black youth would start to create gangs originally from several factors different from what gangs would later become. Crip and blood gangs in the 70s would start to rise all throughout South Central and the rest of Los Angeles. And a well-known gang from the west side of South Central would be founded in the early 70s, and that would be the Rollin 60 Crips, who would later become a fierce and deadly gang from the 70s on up. The 60s would go on to take on several gangs in Los Angeles and embark in one of the deadliest wars in LA gang history with the A-Trade Gangsta Crips. And Mad Ronnie would grow up in an era where the 60s would make a name for themselves. He became a frontline member, being known to use his hands and put in work in the streets, but the streets took a dramatic change from using your hands in the 60s and 70s to gunplay. And growing up in a Rollin 60s community, Mad Ronnie would jump in the streets head first, with many of his close friends and older guys in the neighborhood he looked up to becoming household names in the street world. Mad Ronnie hung around elite names in the Rollin 60s like Mumbles, Banker T, Big Cat, and Petey Wack among others. Just hanging around those guys of that stature in the neighborhood, you had to be official. Heading down a life of crime would lead to Mad Ronnie doing several years in the juvenile and prison systems. He had to go to youth authority, also known as YA, in his teenage years, and this would do nothing but further his life in the streets. While on the streets and in his community, Mad Ronnie had a well-respected reputation, known for being crazy and a loved individual in the 60s. He was liked and admired by his young homies and respected by his peers, and he had a big love for his community. Mad Ronnie was known to look out for his young homies and guide them in the streets. Being in the streets though will also lead to him also going back to jail and serving a little time. After being back on the streets, Mad Ronnie was back in his community, but by 2003, the 60s as a hood would be targeted by the LAPD and the FBI in 2003. The Los Angeles City Attorney would file a gang injunction against the gang, putting over 30 members of the gang on gang files. The gang injunction would state that the 60s had allegedly been responsible for more than 30 murders between 2001 and 2002, and the gang injunction had a lot of restrictions trying to bring the Rollin 60s down, like a restraining order, barring contact with known gang members with each other. It banned activities within the gang, and Rollin 60 Crips would be arrested for possession of a pager or a cell phone, also dressing in gang attire, and also be arrested for gathering in public or driving in numbers of 2 or more in areas controlled by gangs. Mad Ronnie was even named out of the 30 plus men in the gang injunction, and Mad Ronnie loved his homies and his hood so much these provisions had him enraged. Mad Ronnie was known to flip off police who drove by in the 60s hood and called them bitches, stating, "I'm Mad Ronnie, this is my hood." At a court hearing for the 2003 gang injunction against the Rollin 60s, Mad Ronnie was one of the few who showed up in court to protest the judge. He would say, "Where are my rights to be in my own neighborhood? Why can't I talk to my own people in my neighborhood?" Even though going in his later years in life, Mad Ronnie kept the same mentality, an OG, showing love to his peers and his younger homies. You will still see him around in his neighborhood well into his 50s. The 60s community meant a lot to Mad Ronnie. You will still see him with younger members and even rappers from the 60s, like Jay Stone and even Nipsey Hussle. But even at Mad Ronnie's old age, still being active and around the streets would cost him. Mad Ronnie was 59 years old, exactly 100 days shy of his 60th birthday, and that was something he was making a big deal about, being from Rollin 60s and making it to 60 years old. August 19th, 2023, Mad Ronnie and Big Cat and several other Rollin 60s were hanging out that summer evening around 6:30 p.m. in front of a house on Kensington Avenue and 58th. A nearby liquor store surveillance video will capture a car driving by, and then once again driving by again, and then parking the car. A young shooter will exit the car and almost immediately begin firing. In the surveillance video, you can see Mad Ronnie standing his back towards the shots, and suddenly, he lurches forward and his back arches. He takes 3 or 4 stutter steps, and that will be his last. He would then fall to the ground. Big Cat and another person was shot, but both survived. But Mad Ronnie, he lost his life at the age of 59, which many people couldn't believe. He made it this far in life to die at such an older age, and the shooter was never caught. Many people will go on to go to Mad Ronnie's funeral and pay their respects. He would get a lot of recognition and respect after his death, and he is highly regarded in his community. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, check out my previous episodes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.